Hi everyone, today I'm here to tell you that non-binary genders are real, valid, and completely made up, just like male and female genders. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye! Wait, what? What do you mean gender's made up? Gender isn't made up, gender is just genitals, except it's also behaviours and appearances and societal roles and how people feel and... Wait, hang on, what? How do we define gender? What is a gender anyway? I guess in order to examine non-binary genders, we're gonna have to answer this basic question first. This is gonna be a long video. Brace yourselves. Many people will argue, very simply, that gender is determined by genitalia. If you have a penis, you're a man. If you have a vagina, you're a woman. And if you have something else, then we're gonna forget about you because your existence is inconvenient. However, that's not all there is to it, is it? Why would we have entire categories separating people on the basis of what's between our legs? We don't have that for other random characteristics like eye colour. If physical characteristics are all that gender is, then the only purpose of this distinction is to tell other people your potential breeding capacity, which seems a little dehumanizing. Also, that's just not the case. There are a lot of other attributes associated with gender. There is an ideal of what a man should look like, how a woman should behave. If these associations didn't exist, then it wouldn't be possible to say that someone looks like a man or acts like a woman. I mean, how do you act as if you have a vagina? Impersonate childbirth? No, that's not what they're talking about. When someone says that another person looks or acts like a gender, they're referring to attributes understood by society to be associated with that gender. The fact that it is possible to even say that and be understood means that these characteristics are not exclusive to the owners of specific sets of genitalia. Therefore, genitalia cannot be said to determine gender as a whole. This is honestly so reductive. Can we please move away from genitals now?
Trans women are not female.
There was an objective standard between male and female.
Trans women are biologically male.
Biological means
Simply looking at people's genitals and assessing them based on their outward appearance.
vagina or penis.
No? Okay, I guess we'll stay here then. In this section, I'll be referring to some points made in an article by Ian Steadman, which I'll be linking to in the description. Even if you do already have a solid understanding of this stuff, I would recommend reading it just because it's really good. The biological factor is always shown to be most important. Even if you can prove that gender is a social construct, you can't deny the underlying reality of biological sex. There is a clear difference between male and female, rendering these people different, and that is not a construct. Except it is. Sex is a taxonomy, a scientific classification, a way of grouping stuff, sometimes in ways that don't always work and later need to be updated. I'll give you an example. In 1798, Western scientists were totally confused by the duck-billed platypus. It laid eggs like a bird, but lactated and had fur like a mammal. It so went against everything understood about biology at the time that scientists actually dismissed its existence as a hoax. However, when the platypus, however rare, however divergent, was confirmed to be real, the definition of the word mammal was expanded to include it. Biologically speaking, sex is a binary distinction made when someone is born based on their visible primary sex characteristics, their genitalia. However, that's just how sex is assigned. It's not all that it refers to. Sex also refers to aspects of someone's chromosome pattern, as well as their secondary sex characteristics, such as hormone levels, breast growth, or facial hair. The words male and female refer to typical groupings of all these separate characteristics. So, because biological sex does not refer purely to the factor by which it is assigned, it can't be said to be an empirically stable attribute in and of itself. For starters, intersex people are born with physical characteristics and/or chromosomes that differ from expected male and female patterns. And because people get really stuck on the chromosome side of things, I'm going to go into that in some more detail. We're taught in school that XX equals female and XY equals male, science. But the actual reality of genetics is a little bit more complicated than what we were taught in school. Who would have thought? Sometimes those patterns literally just swap and you end up with XY females or XX males or something else like XXY. What does that mean? Well, usually just clearly male men, most of whom don't ever find out or have reason to suspect that they have an extra chromosome. Scientifically speaking, a distinction is made between chromosome patterns and male or female phenotype. A female individual with XY chromosomes is referred to as an XY female, not as male. In other words, XY and XX don't always mean male and female, and there are also other patterns that can occur. Incidentally, the platypus has 10 sex chromosomes, making a male platypus XY, 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 XY. They really should have had a Z chromosome in there just for good measure. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that far from being some kind of concrete law, chromosomes are just yet another variable attribute in the assigned sex soup. That was not a nice phrase. It's also worth noting that secondary sex characteristics vary a lot anyway, within sexes. Like, it's very common to find people who are taller or shorter or curvier or more or less hairy or are in some way unusual for their assigned sex. Given the extent of natural variation and exception possible, definitions partially based on these can't be said to be consistent or even clear-cut. Finally, most sex characteristics are malleable as heck. When somebody takes hormones, they alter both their primary and their secondary sex characteristics to quite a significant degree. If that individual then goes on to also have surgery, those characteristics change completely beyond recognition. Therefore, if biological sex is based on sex characteristics and someone's sex characteristics change, then it also follows that they change biological sex. To say that they don't goes against the definition of what biological sex is. Not that we have to assign biological sex like this. I mean, we could do it in a different way altogether. For example, we could have decided that all children have no sex and only get given one when they stop growing. Anyone who reaches a height of over 5'8" can be male and under that can be female. New law, I've decided, change your passports accordingly. After all, height is a characteristic clearly associated with biological sex. I mean, sure, there are exceptions, but doesn't that just prove the rule? And as for changing your sex, well, it's very difficult to change your height. Seriously, height-altering surgery involves breaking the bones in your legs and inserting devices that pull the bones apart millimeter by millimeter each day, in an agonizing process that can take up to 6 months to complete, and also involves rehabilitation in which the individual has to relearn how to walk. Whereas your entire body, genitals included, will start to change after a few months taking pills. You could argue that height is a much more stable trait than genitalia to be the foundation upon which we base biological sex. This is, of course, complete nonsense. I'm not suggesting we base sex on height. My point is that doing so wouldn't necessarily make less sense than the way we do it now. I am not saying that penises and vaginas are constructs or that biological sex is based on nothing. But it is a categorization subject to change, variation, and exception, and it could be defined in another way altogether. It is a classification, not an empirically stable attribute. Since that's all there is to it, there should be no issues making changes to the taxonomy as we learn more about the subject, just like any other branch of science. And yet, people seem to be a lot more concerned about certain female athletes racing as women than they are about poor old Pluto being officially demoted from planethood. Let's be real here, this discussion is not about scientific objectivity. If it was, then everything I've just said would already be widely established and I wouldn't need to make this video. Rather, it's the societal implications of binary sex that cause people to interpret the facts to fit pre-existing definitions rather than allowing those facts to tell us what the definitions should be and to change them where required. Which is actually very unscientific. The main difference between platypuses and people is that platypuses probably don't give a crap about whether you call them a mammal or a fish or a vegetable, whereas humans do care about what sex you call them. Like, quite a lot. In one article from 2008 that I read while researching for this video, I found that some XY women had been lied to by medical professionals. They'd been told that they had twisted ovaries instead of the truth that they had internal testes. Such was the psychological damage presumed to be done to these people if they felt that they were in any way not female, even if they physically appeared and had previously felt female in every other way. Which brings us back to the bigger discussion about gender overall. Even if biological sex was absolute, which it is not, then I would still maintain that it should not be seen as the foundation of gender. The effects of biology on someone's psyche can't be clearly separated from the effects of a society that dictates and reinforces gender constructs from the moment we are born and stuck in blue or pink bibs. And you tell me just where the underlying biological reality is in that. Now, making a gender distinction along biological lines maybe made more sense in the past when your life pretty much was determined by your genitals and we were ruled by the patriarchy and everything was shit. But today, we're still ruled by the patriarchy and everything's still shit, but at least we're not as defined by dots between our legs as we once were. And you know, that's a good thing. We've talked about biology and we've talked about presentation. What we haven't discussed is identity. How much a person personally identifies with the attributes that they associate with a certain gender. Bullshit, Carol. How can you feel like a natural woman? Either you are a woman or you're not. You either have a vagina or you don't. Shut up about your feelings, snowflake. Carol King, presumably, wasn't told and conditioned throughout her entire life to believe that she couldn't be a woman. She probably never felt the need to question it. Despite this, she still felt like a woman, enough that she wrote an entire song about it. It's just that the gender she felt happened to correlate with the gender she'd been assigned at birth. Trans people have exactly the same feelings, it's just that the correlation isn't there. Where do these feelings come from? What makes someone feel like a natural woman? Who knows, and when it gets down to it, who cares? Like, this stuff can be interesting, but it's not relevant in any practical day-to-day way. Gender identity is shaped by an individual's socialization, lived experience, and environment, as well as their biology. In other words, it is incredibly complicated, and what causes someone to feel like one gender or another can't be pinned down to a single isolated factor. So, in the end, isn't the most logical thing simply to allow people to say what their gender is for themselves? It really doesn't need to be complicated. If you feel like the gender you were assigned at birth, that'll do, stick with it. If you don't, change it. Be that woman. And be that man. If you have to. But what happens if you don't feel like either of those? This has been a lot of information, so before we move on, let's cool down and take a snack break with our frozen goods correspondent, Hazel James.
Thanks, Shanalika. Gender is a lot like one of these. Now, for reasons concerning Ofcom product placement regulations, I'm going to call these smush doggos. When you're born, a doctor will take a look at you and based on certain anatomical presumptions, assign you either a blue or a pink smush doggo. Now, for most people, that works out fine. They go through life enjoying their blue flavour smush doggo from birth until death, never wavering in their enjoyment of that unmistakable flavour of blue. A few people decide, hey, you know what? Blue just doesn't do it for me. I've never actually liked blue raspberry as a flavour or a concept. Give me some of that good strawberry. And to be thoroughly reductive about the process, what they will do is pour out the blue raspberry, get some of that good strawberry, and oh yeah, that's much better. But for some people, that doesn't cut it either. Ask any child whether they want a blue flavour or a red flavour smush doggo, and they will tell you that the only correct answer is a mix, please. But hold on a second, what if I told you that there are flavours other than blue and pink? We've got apple, we've got grape, we've got orange, we've got cola, we've got lemon. And you can mix and match these however you want. After all, any botanist will tell you that blue raspberry is a social construct. Maybe some days you're feeling like a bit of lime, but not too much. Maybe another day you want grape with Coke on top. And maybe the day after that you're feeling like a lemon smush doggo, and then the day after that you're feeling like an orange smush doggo, and then the day after that you think, actually, I want some of that pink again. You can have 2 flavours at a time, even 3. That's not greedy. You love yourself, and you deserve it. You can have as much smush doggo as you like more than you can fit in a cup. That's fine. Just keep going. Have as much as you like. It's cool. I mean, within reason. But you don't even have to have smush doggo. You might not even like it. That's fine. Pour it out. Donate it to a friend. Have water or tea or a nice smoothie or fill it up with yogurt. I don't care. It's up to you. I would like to say at this point that while you can do whatever the hell you want with your gender, this is just an overwrought analogy, and Shenalica Incorporated does not condone the excess consumption of sugary iced drinks. Cheers.
The idea of a social construct can be a complex one to understand in and of itself. But as a rough summary, a social construct is one that is historically contingent, changeable, and determined by cultural and social discourse. Binary gender can be clearly shown to be a social construct. And as society changes, so too must the constructs that we use to understand it. For some of us, neither male nor female gender constructs fit to the extent that we identify as something else, non-binary. Non-binary is an umbrella term that itself falls under the transgender umbrella. It describes every gender outside of male and female. For example, agender, gender fluid, demi-boy, demi-girl, and so on and so forth. These labels describe the specific way that a person identifies. For example, agender people don't feel that they have any gender at all, whereas a gender fluid person will find that their sense of gender shifts from one place to another. If this all sounds a bit mad and over your head, that's okay. You don't need to know all the genders. It's not even possible. There are too many. You don't need to understand something in order to be able to accept it and to respect it. I mean, I don't understand foot fetishes, but I still accept it and respect it and don't kink shame anyone. If all you know is that non-binary is a thing and you can use they pronouns, we're probably all good. There are no universal rules when it comes to how people perceive their gender because it's personal. People like to get into the nitty-gritty of it and find specific labels and pronouns because it gives them a place to fit in, it helps them understand themselves better, and yes, it makes them feel cool. I mean, in my case, agender works, its premise describes what I am, but I much prefer the term gendified. I mean, wouldn't you? And before you start saying, oh, all you queer people can think about is your stupid made-up genders, please don't tell me that cis people don't obsess over their own stupid made-up genders in exactly the same way. If you're ever not sure of someone's pronouns, please default to they, because in addition to referring to people who prefer they pronouns, it also doesn't inherently specify a gender at all, and therefore can't technically be incorrect. Although, obviously, if someone tells you their pronouns are something specific, use those, because not doing that would be rude. There is also, and I would like to stress this, no set way for non-binary people to look. Most of us feel that we present in a way that is in some way androgynous, but the word androgyny itself, it's hard to define and it's also not required, and it's just people can present however they want. It's actually really simple, just people can present how they want. To sum up, non-binary people exist, and we exist for the same reason that cis men and cis women do. A set of characteristics were distinguished and some definitions were created to refer to someone possessing those characteristics, to determine and to limit their role in society. That created the construct of binary gender. And right now, the same phenomenon is changing that construct and lifting some of those limits. I obviously can't speak for all non-binary people here, but I didn't identify this way for attention or to make a statement. I hadn't heard of non-binary and I didn't know the phrase social construct, but the feeling of belonging to neither gender was overpowering, and I saw binary gender as constructed and restrictive and unnecessary. At that age, I was also an idiot who didn't care about anything except exploring space on sport. I didn't tell anyone how I felt. So clearly I wasn't doing it for attention or to make a statement. That was just how I identified. And it still is. But whether you're actively involved in politics or not, non-binary identity carries a lot of inherent political significance, and not just because us getting to exist is good. The acceptance of non-binary existence isn't just good for us, it reflects on the positively changing nature of the way that society perceives gender overall. Over time, thanks to improving rights for people who aren't cis-het white men, and the gradual disintegration of strict gender roles, even binary genders have become kind of more malleable. Being a man no longer means you absolutely have to be the bread earner. Being a woman no longer means you absolutely have to be the housewife. Like, there are still pressures, but these things aren't set in stone the way they once were. These words have, in some ways, started to change meaning, and that terrifies some people, but I've never come across a good reason as to why. Isn't it a blatantly positive thing? Isn't it a step forwards for individual freedom and autonomy when people can choose their identity for themselves rather than having to conform to something based on a label stuck on them at birth? Of course, instead of seeing non-binary acceptance as a positive result of the decreasing rigidity of gender, some people use it as an attack on non-binary people. If being a man or a woman doesn't determine your role in society, if gender really doesn't exist, then why do you need your own special label? Just be a feminine man, be a masculine woman, be gender non-conforming within the binary that already exists. To which I would say, if being a man or a woman doesn't impact my societal role or behaviour or appearance, in other words, it is, by your definition, a pretty meaningless one, then what's the point of me having it? If someone says that you can present and behave in whatever way you want, but you have to stick to binary genders and pronouns, then they're not letting you behave and present in whatever way you want. Of course, if you are a masculine cis woman or a feminine cis man, that's totally legitimate. I'm not here to tell you what your gender is. That's for you to do. No one else. Not your parents, your doctor, your priest, or racist helium balloons on the internet. This line of argument also ignores a very important point. That saying gender is a construct is not the same thing as saying it doesn't exist. I'm not suggesting we all become amorphous, miasmic, genderless blobs from now on. I think that would be fairly unrealistic. If it helps to understand, I think a pretty strong analogy can be drawn here between gender and religion. Regardless of cultural acceptability or popularity, all religions are also social constructs. You may be born into a religion. You then have the option of keeping that religion, changing religion, or ditching religion altogether. You may find religion forced on you without your consent. And even if you do successfully leave your religion, you may still find that religion impacting your life. Given the extent to which religion is embedded in society, and the fact that it can significantly impact people's lives, regardless of whether they belong to that religion or not, it would be ridiculous to suggest that religion doesn't exist, just because it's a social construct. In this respect, gender is exactly the same. Even if you go against traditional gender stereotypes, which being any kind of trans does to some extent, we're still working within a society where binary genders are the commonly understood standard. Sure, in an ideal world, maybe we wouldn't have gender at all, as in those labels wouldn't exist. We'd just have people presenting and behaving in whatever way they want. Same way as in an ideal world, we maybe wouldn't have sexual orientation. We'd just have people being attracted to whoever they happen to be attracted to. However, applying that logic in this day and age, probably in any day and age, doesn't work. It fails to acknowledge that we have lived in a gendered society throughout all of recorded history, and also fails to acknowledge the systematic oppression of cis women, trans people, and even gender non-conforming cis men under a patriarchal society. When people run with this idea with malicious intent, it's also often used as an excuse to do sexist or transphobic things and then say it's fine because if gender doesn't exist though. For these reasons, this line of debate is largely a deliberate misinterpretation of trans identity, used by people who want to preserve the gender binary, not by non-binary people. We aren't making that argument. We are just trying to be ourselves. And in doing so, we happen to be helping to move towards a society where people can be free to present and identify however they want without fear of ridicule, rejection, and oppression. Okay, I'm done. Now it's your turn. Give me a reason why we should force people back into rigid gender constructs. Or you could just allow this unrestricted full spectrum of personality and expression to unfold freely in front of us. Because, like it or not, that's happening anyway.